We're going to start now. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 180-162, 180-163, 180-164, and resolution number 180-185. Mr. McDermott, please read the titles of the bills and resolution.
Bill number 180-162, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2019-2024 inclusive. Bill number 180-163, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2019 capital budget. Bill number 180-164, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2019. Resolution 180-185, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia, a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2019 through 2023 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2018, which is to be submitted to the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this council, approved by the mayor on January 3rd, 1992, by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Today we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2019, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2019 through fiscal 2024. Today we hear testimony from the following departments: Water Department, Streets Department, Aviation, Community Empowerment, and Opportunity. Mr. McDermott, the first person to testify of the administration is?
Deborah McCarty, Water Department.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Council President Clark and members of City Council. I am Deborah McCarty, Commissioner of the Philadelphia Water Department. With me today are Melissa Labuda, our Deputy Commissioner of Finance, and Donna Schwartz, our Deputy Commissioner of Operations. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on the Water Department's fiscal year 2019 operating budget. I'd like to begin by highlighting several initiatives the Water Department has begun or continued over the past year. The Water Department launched 2 very important customer service initiatives in partnership with the Water Revenue Bureau. First, we successfully unveiled our Low-Income Assistance Program, TAP, last summer. Since then, we've been working with Water Revenue, Office of Innovation and Technology, council offices, advocates, and other stakeholders to enroll customers in TAP, otherwise known as Tiered Assistance Program. I am pleased to report that as of April 11th, nearly 9,000 individuals have enrolled in a program that provides water bills that are affordable and based on household income. Second, customers now need to know only one phone number for all water-related issues: 215-685-6300. The PWD and Water Revenue call centers physically merged last month into our state-of-the-art call center. We are very excited about this interdepartmental coordination, which will improve first call resolution and response time. We continue to treat and distribute some of the highest quality drinking water in the country. We also continued our lead safety programming for our customers in several ways, most importantly by removing lead service lines during water main relays and offering help loans for customers to replace lead service lines even if they aren't leaking. As a result of these initiatives, since summer of 2016, approximately 550 lead service lines have been removed from homes in Philadelphia. Our crews showed incredible dedication to their work by repairing approximately 600 water main breaks over the most brutal winters in recent history. The Water Department also responded to over 2,200 customer calls regarding leaks from December through February. I should note, we appreciate City Council's recognition of our employees who stepped up to this challenge. After years-long collaboration with L&I, Streets, PWD implemented a sewer connection inspection program which will improve the quality of private plumbing work in the street and should lead to fewer cave-ins. Over the next several years, we plan to increase the miles of water main relays from 32 to 42 per year, improving system reliability. We continue to meet our yearly targets for Clean Water Act compliance and can report close to 1,100 green acres as of March 1st. Through the third quarter of fiscal 18, we can report a 30% minority, women, or disabled person-owned business participation rate in our contracts and expect to meet our fiscal 18 goal of 32%. Also, of the 15 new professional services contracts PWD awarded so far in fiscal 18, 8 went to DBE primes. We continue to support the Power Corps and high school apprenticeship programs, through which we've hired 37 individuals to date. Our 3 wastewater treatment plants achieved another year of perfect compliance, which is recognized by the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. The Water Fund is an enterprise fund of the city, funded by revenues generated through charges to our customers. The Water Department's operating budget is a component of the Water Fund, and it is what we are discussing today. We work hard to implement operational efficiencies and to keep customer charges as low as possible. However, to meet our service goals and regulatory mandates, we are requesting an additional $24.7 million in our fiscal 19 budget over the current fiscal 18 projection. The increase is primarily attributable to employee costs, professional services, and equipment. In closing, I'd like to thank the department's workforce, which is working 24/7, 7 days a week to keep the water running, the sewers clear, and our waterways clean. Thank you again for your time, and I am happy to answer questions.
Thank you for your testimony. A couple of quick questions. I believe there's a bill currently in council to update the bond covenant language. Can you explain why the changes to our borrowing practices are necessary?
I'm going to defer to our CFO.
Good morning, Council President. Melissa Labuda, Philadelphia Water Department Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you.
The bond covenant changes were accounting changes to allow for more efficient practices within our bond indenture, which was established in 1989. Some of the changes related to an account that is funded with bond proceeds as protection should there ever be a default on our bonds, the Debt Service Reserve Fund. One change was to affect how the money flowed from that account to other accounts. A second change was to formalize an agreement the department put in place back in 2005, 2006 related to an insurance covenant. All we did was memorialize that formally. So there was just practices to modernize our indenture.
Okay, thank you. Also in your budget detail, you highlight a transfer of positions to the general fund due to regulatory requirements and a transfer of positions from the capital budget. Can you detail the necessity of these transfers? That would be on section 58, page 3.
So we have a number of positions funded out of capital, and we are gradually moving them into the operating fund. So currently, for fiscal 19, we're looking to transfer 82 positions from capital to the operating fund. And that's just a better practice to fund it in operating. And we need to do that gradually over a few years. We currently have 247 remaining in capital.
Okay. I want to ask you a question. Stormwater. Not a difficult one, actually. I know that the water department has or is attempting to embark on a number of projects where they do the stormwater treatment utilizing vacant land. I know in a couple of areas they're talking about some vacant lots to do some treatment that would actually beautify those particular lots, but while achieving the goal of allowing stormwater enhancement, obviously the water going in the ground as opposed to in a sewer system. Can you just talk to me briefly about your strategy, short and long term, on that, and your investment and ultimately the return on investment if we are as aggressive as some of us would like in doing that? Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about that program?
I can try. So we have, by federal mandate, have to reduce the volume of stormwater overflow into our waterways, otherwise known as combined sewer overflow. So when it rains in the older sections of the city, the idea is to keep that rainwater, that runoff like yesterday, from getting into our sewer. So the green stormwater infrastructure is one of those approaches. We are the city is I think, setting the way for the country in that approach, where a good part of our program is focused on taking land and letting the water soak into the ground as opposed to getting into our sewers. The program also includes infrastructure upgrades at our treatment plants and our collection system, things like lining the sewer, all in the long-term goal of that 25-year program. This June will be 7 years in to reducing the combined sewer overflows into our waterways, and thus the pollution that gets into our waterways.
Okay. Can you tell me why it takes so long? That's my real question. It's
Because
like, why?
we have to be thoughtful with our ratepayers' money. We don't have we couldn't just do it all tomorrow.
Well, I mean,
one,
even
because of the
even
money,
when
but
you
also physically, we just don't have the resources to just tomorrow just do it all. So we're 11.
Well, I mean, in instances where we've actually identified locations, and it seems like from the time they say, okay,
Oh,
we're
I'm
going to treat
sorry. I misunderstood
these
your
lots,
question.
and then
Yeah.
it just takes to the point where in some cases people said, never mind, and come up with an alternative strategy. I mean, what is it that takes so long?
So we want to be thoughtful about it, and we want to make sure that site makes sense. We have to look for contamination, for instance, make sure that we're not infiltrating contaminated soil down into the groundwater, and make sure we can get the water to that site from the street. It does take a while to design a thoughtful project. And the other part is, if we're in a community, we want to make sure we get the community input as well.
Oh, yeah. It's more often than not, and I'm speaking obviously about an area that we're looking at treating up in part of the district, and there's already a vacant lot, so the water's kind of like already going in the land, and I'm just, man, I'm a layperson clearly, but I don't understand why it takes so long to create something where if you're worried about contamination, is it a thing about liability if somehow we now put some sort of treatment or stormwater treatment utilizing green space and all the other things, that now we might be liable if ultimately there's some contaminants in the ground?
Well, that's part of it, and we just don't want to be part of contaminating the groundwater further. But if you share the site, I'm happy to look into what the issues might be at the site.
I got a map. I'm gonna give you the map before
Okay.
we leave. Yeah,
Okay.
we actually started. We talked about the site, and I don't know who from your department was a part of the conversations, right? We were looking at doing it some years ago, and then when we found out how long it was going to take, people were like, say, well, never mind, we'll come up with something else. And now I understand we're possibly revisiting those locations, because you do want to have an opportunity to have, some treatment that provides green space, but the timing just seems so long. It just made people lose interest. So I'll just give you the map.
Okay.
Without laboring the point. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. Commissioner, you talked about the merger of water revenue, which always seemed to make sense because people heard water. That's what they thought it was all one department anyway. Has there been any particular challenges with that, or it sounds like you're pretty confident it's up to speed, or is there still things that...
Well, physically the merger happened at the end of March, and so we're in the midst of training folks.
Still
We did
early,
some
yeah.
training beforehand, but it's a constant challenge to improve. So we're not going to get that first call resolution tomorrow per se,
Right.
but that's our long-term goal. Hopefully not that long-term though, a short-term goal.
Okay.
And we're also looking at improving the system, the call system, the cloud system. So we have a RFP out, we're evaluating the proposals, and that should also, hopefully by January, the new vendor would be on board and we'll have a better system. Because there's some constraints right now, we just can't make spur-of-the-moment changes when conditions out in the city change.
So you mean this is the public calling in? Is that what
Yes.
you mean? Yeah.
Yes, and but I've noticed just in looking at, when a complaint gets to me, I've noticed some improvements actually in how things are handled. But it's not going to be immediate, but we hope it's a very short term.
Okay, thanks on that. And this is kind of revenue related. Now, I didn't see this story, but I understand from a couple people called my office, there was a story about a certain percentage of customers that are delinquent, a fairly high percentage. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? Because I didn't see the article myself. But
Yeah,
that leads me into the question, do you have a figure on, this might not have been an accurate story, that's why I'm asking, of how many customers are delinquent at this time? Percentage-wise more than real numbers. And then I had a follow-up on that.
I know going into, I think I know what you might be talking about. You're talking about the article about the shut-offs that began April 3rd, actually.
Okay.
And we started this, the moratorium was over April 1st, or April 3rd, really, because April 1st was a Sunday and Easter. But there were about 40,000 customers that were in the queue potentially to be shut off. We, despite what some of the media said, we were not shutting off 40,000 customers that day or that week. It does get spread out. And, over that period of time, there is an opportunity for folks to get into a payment agreement, get in an affordable rates program, whatever might need to be.
Okay.
But
Yeah, that was the second part of my question. What kind of program, you kind of talk about it in your written testimony, but what kind of programs are available for people, either if they dispute the bill, number one, or two, if they just can't pay it because they have income issues.
Right, so
Yeah.
if you noticed, we have
Okay,
these
there you go.
cool things
All right.
here. So we have our affordable rates program. It's one-stop shop, one application. You don't have to know, what program you think you should qualify for. You put in the application.
Okay.
So we have around 8,000 customers in TAP and around 1,000 in other programs, including the senior citizen discount. And so Water Revenue will look at what is the best program for the customer, and hopefully the customer doesn't have to figure it out for themselves.
That sounds good. Okay, very good. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Council President, thank you very much. And Commissioner, I want to thank you and commend your department. I think for what I saw personally, it was a difficult winter with a lot of water main breaks. I know there were several in my neighborhood, but I will have to say the response was very good. Follow-up was very good, and I commend you for that.
Well, thank you.
Wait times for customer service, and I want to tell you a little story, and then I do have a direct question on it. And as the funny Geico commercial, when George Washington crosses I-95, yells back and says, "Well, we all have places to go," and I think that's a fact. And anytime people wait, I don't like it. This doesn't pertain directly to your department, but in a way it does. I did speak, but I want you to be aware of it. I actually had a distraught constituent who happened to be my wife. I have many constituents, but I have but one
That's
wife.
probably the most important one.
Yes, that is the very most important one. Had a problem with getting a water bill paid quickly. That was our fault. In the end, it really wasn't a fault at all, but I said, "Dear, do not worry. I work across the street. I will hand carry it down." And I did. But then a very difficult thing came about. I was in a line because only one or two tellers were open. Now, I know this doesn't come directly under you, and I called Commissioner Breslin on it as I was waiting in line. I waited in that line to pay our water bill, which I thought had to be paid immediately. In the end, we had several more weeks, but it was a panic situation. I called Commissioner Breslin because I really literally waited 45 minutes, and I did a little survey while I was down there. Did not tell anyone I was a councilman because I probably would have gotten beat up, and maybe rightfully so. But many of the people there were paying their water bill. Many, because they're poor, were also paying it with cash. But the fact that they had to wait along with me for over 45 minutes is not a good thing. I then called the commissioner. Actually, I called him while I was there. He actually came down. We had a follow-up meeting. I don't know if those lines are still there, but whenever they are, they're not good. So wherever your department could monitor that is important. The lines of improved customer service and wait times and help with bills, what is your department doing really about that? What are your plans to deal with those sort of situations?
So the merge of the call center with water revenue and PWD employees, so where the folks that typically answer emergency calls are merged with the folks that answer the water revenue calls, and folks are being cross-trained, and we believe that this is will be a big initiative for the our customers, so they can get first call resolution. We can drive down those wait times, which are unacceptable.
Yeah. No.
We all agree, and that's why we work very closely with Water Revenue on this initiative and figure out what makes the most sense. And we came to the conclusion that merging the call centers does.
That's great.
And so we're very much looking forward to improve customer service in that regard, for sure.
Is there ever a follow-up in just talking to a customer later? Do you think you've been handled well? Do you think, a lot of companies do it.
Yes, and we actually do work with, I believe it's Temple Surveys? Yeah, Temple University, sorry.
Oh, really?
Yes, on doing customer surveys and asking how we can make improvements, and have acted on some of those, some prior surveys. For instance, when we're in the street doing construction, nobody likes that on their block, of course, but we could at least improve how we do that. And some of the things we've tried to improve have resulted from the customer surveys.
Well, I think that's a great idea, using Temple University as part of that.
Keep it local.
Yeah, well, I think that's real important. Who do you deal with there, or what department, or how does that work? So I think it's something other departments ought to be doing.
Joanne?
Hi, Joanne Dom, Public Affairs Manager for the Water Department. We have been working with Nina Ho at
Okay.
Temple University, and Nina actually went over to University of Penn, but still partnering with Temple on these surveys. Yeah,
Wonderful.
they've been very valuable for us for customer service.
That's fantastic. And is it possible that I could ever take a look at some of those
Oh,
surveys?
of course, yeah, we'd be happy to share them.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. One last question I have. I've looked at this book, Guide for Customers. I think it's excellent. How is this being distributed?
I'm so glad you like that, because that
I like it a lot.
That guide has been a long time in the making, and as a result of what we're hearing from customers. We initially ordered about 5,000 of them. We take them to every public meeting. We have them online so people can download them. We took them recently to the March Block Captain Rally. We distributed the remainder that we had, so we just recently ordered another 5,000.
That's a good idea.
we
'Cause I
have-
think
we
I
are-
like some for my office.
We would love to make sure that you have as many copies as you would like to have. We also are in the process of developing a Spanish version.
Very
So
good.
we'll have that available soon.
I think that's excellent.
Thank you.
I thank you very much. And Council President, or whoever's in charge here, I'm finished. Council President, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner, good morning.
Good morning.
I guess I should start out with, there's a section of my district where Baker Square resides. We were besieged with a number of water main and sewage breaks, which closed down the mall. You guys went in, invested, I believe, $10 million?
I'm sorry,
Was it 10 million that you put in?
10 million, right, I know. Yes, $10 million.
And we
A
appreciate
mile of
it.
48-inch main.
So this impacts not only my district, but Clark's district and Cindy's district, Councilwoman Bass's district, all converges at that point. It is a hub for shopping activity in our respective districts. We are so glad that you made that investment. The merchants, the residents, and our elected officials in the area are glad that they don't have to look at that prospect again. So thank you. I could go on because you guys have a actual newsletter by district about all of the things that you've done, but I won't. I'll spare you that and just say that we are appreciative of the work that you do. A couple of quick questions. The dredging of the canal up in East
Manayunk.
Falls, Manayunk in my district, how are we proceeding with that? And I had the opportunity, along with Councilman Green, to be out on the Schuylkill because the council has a rowing team, and we were told about the need for dredging in that area. So if you could talk about those two things.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the dredging of the canal is Fairmont Park, the Parks and Rec department, right? Yeah, and as well as the Schuylkill. Although we would, of course, partner with whomever
So I'll say
wanted
those
to work on
questions
an
for them.
initiative.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So recently.
Well, yeah, so I was just reminded, we, as you know, have 2 drinking water plants whose source of water is the Schuylkill,
There you go.
Belmont, ours,
Right.
and Queen Lane on the other side of the river. And so there are times where we have to dredge at the intakes where we pull the water in. But as far as, I think you're talking about the dredging down by the boathouses, and
Yeah.
that's really not in our wheelhouse.
So is there a interest that you would have in doing that? So you talked about the intake valves. And
Well, the
having-
intake, yeah, so where we bring the water into the pumping stations, the respective pumping stations on either side of the river. So, over time, silt and debris lies there, and we need to clear that so the pumps can pull in the volume of water they need to without cavitating.
Say it again.
So at Belmont, that dredging occurred this past fall.
Okay. There was a recent article about the dual lateral situation in Philadelphia's drinking water. I know this is nothing new. We've been dealing with this for a long time. A lot of projects have come up because we tried to address the EPA's issue. Where are we at with that by way of the 3,000 miles that we deal with every year?
So luckily, it's not 3,000 miles of the dual pipes or the separately stored area. But that's a constant challenge for us, addressing those pipes. It's very laborious to identify where the storm sewer drains into the sanitary, but even worse, where the sanitary drains into the storm, because that is, every time, I like to say, every time you flush the toilet, it goes to a waterway near you, and that's not a good thing. So we have crews that are out throughout the separately stored areas of the city looking for those cross connections and trying to get those all corrected. But it's a continuous process. We are actually looking at ways to improve it and speed it up, but nonetheless, it's going to probably be there as long as we have 2 pipes.
So I know the EPA kind of nudged us along by way of these. So from the time, maybe in another administration, I think it might have came around, to now, how much progress have we made? And in what ways? Because I know Venice Island is a result of that, is that right?
Right. Keeping the sanitary sewage from getting into the, that was one of our larger captures of sanitary sewage and keeping it from getting into the stormwater. That's correct.
So since that time, have we done any other improvements?
We've not done large projects. Typically, it's on a residential basis, a house-by-house basis, and that's what makes it so laborious.
So for example, there was go ahead.
So for fiscal, I'm seeing that for fiscal 17, there were 36 cross connections that were corrected, but 31 were residential and 5 were mixed-use properties.
So these are small bites.
Yep.
So there was some discussion by way of rainwater runoff that there would be projects where we restored ball fields and then put capture containers under them. Is that something for
Well,
rainwater?
that will be part of our long-term control plan or Green City Clean Waters program, it sounds like you're talking about.
Yes.
And so we are continuing on those projects, and we are on target. We're coming into our 7th year. We have 5-year milestones,
There you go.
25-year program, and we are on target right now. We have over 1,100 green acres, and we're on target to meet the 2148 green acres by year 10.
So if I recall, it was Councilwoman Sanchez that had talked about this possibility of fields being restored.
Yeah, I know.
So have we done any of that?
I'm sorry.
So ball fields
Right.
being restored
Mhm.
for the catchment to be built under them. And then similar to Venice Island,
Mhm.
we have a basketball court on the top. Is that project, are those projects being thought about?
Yes, yes, and, I'm familiar with some rec centers.
Because I just want to make sure I get one. That's what all of this is about. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we have some projects, and we're always, we work with Parks and Rec. We hope to work with them on rebuild. When the opportunities arise and it makes sense, we want to be there.
All right, thank you. I just want to make sure,
Get yours in there.
yeah, it was a novel idea to take an opportunity to correct some of the systems design for rainwater runoff and the dual laterals to capture more rainwater over a 48-hour period and then release it. I thought that was great, particularly if I'm getting a ball field out of it. So we look forward to that kind of discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Commissioner and Department.
Good morning.
I wanted to ask you a question. I was contacted late yesterday about residents on Union and Sloan. And I understand they have a private sewer and that they receive notices that they each have to pay $500 for work, that the water department hired a plumber, and then they received a notice saying each of you has to pay $500, and we're leaning your property. And my question is this. I understand there may be different rules for private sewers and that people don't know when you move what the issue is. But my question is, if we need to fix something on somebody's block, why don't we have a meeting? Why don't we talk to them? Why don't we tell them what it might cost? Why don't we tell them we can lien your property? Leaning your property can be a benefit for some people, but it seems to me that it's not fair for you to send somebody a letter saying, I'm leaning your property. And I don't think that's fair, and I don't think people, I think the people have a right to know what's in your mind and a right to be met with and contacted up front and all of that. And I'm sure if it's happening there, I just heard that there's something going on Regent Street that I need to deal with, and that it could be that we introduce legislation. I don't know, because we're open to doing whatever we need to for our constituents, but we have to have open information and communication about these things.
Yeah, so private sewers are a huge challenge. On Sloan and Union, that block, there are 29 parcels and property owners. And it started because some folks on Union Street were getting backup of sewage in their basements. And so we went out to see what could be the problem, and it ended up being the private sewer that was in the back of the properties on Union. So that block of Union and Sloan feed to the backs of their properties, and then that ties into the public sewer. It's always difficult. We try to communicate with as many customers as possible to let them know that, particularly when it's in the back of a property, that we need to get in there, that we're going to, if you all want to fix it, usually an emergency situation, folks just want it fixed, and I can understand not wanting sewage in your basement. And customer field service folks work very hard to make sure that people are aware that, we're going to be doing this on their behalf, but it needs to be distributed, the cost needs to be distributed among everybody that's connected. This particular instance, I think we put in about 20 feet of pipe and a new clean out. But it's always better to have a public sewer. And, really, to advocate, as you know, I think the best way is to, if their city council sees fit, pass an ordinance to allow us to design and install a public sewer for those blocks. And there's another street, I can't remember the name, that's parallel to Union and Sloan, and they have a private sewer as well. And we're happy to work with your office to get that done. The challenge, I should note, for the folks that have them in the back of their homes, our public sewer would of course be in the street, so reversing their plumbing is an additional cost, but we do offer a help loan to do that.
Yes, well, we would like to, again, offer that there be a community meeting and
We're
that
happy to-
people be offered the right to create a separate bill, even with the city.
We're happy
Or-
to go to a community meeting on this, or happy to do that.
Thank you, we'll let them know. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Council President.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to talk about your budgets on page 3. And I want to go back to last year. I actually kept my paperwork from last year. And I noticed last year, this is a good thing, not a bad thing. I just want to point out a few things. In your fiscal year 16 budget, the original appropriation was $367 million. And your actually obligations were 333. You were 34 million below. That's a good thing, okay? In fiscal year 17, you forecasted 383 million. And when you came to us this time last year for that budget, you thought you would be at 375, but you actually wound up better at 360. That's better. That's good. This is all good, not bad, okay? So you're 15 million below. Do you really think that this year you're going to go from 360, which was last year the fiscal obligations, this year to 394, which is almost a 10% increase? Because when I'm looking at these numbers, I don't think we really estimated 18. We just copied over the numbers as they're identical.
Councilman, we do believe very much that we're going to come very close to our projections for fiscal year 18. We have seen unforeseen rises in costs related to our regulatory program, the consent order and agreement. We've exceeded the original contracted amount by $5 million. That happened back in February timeframe. We're seeing continued pressure on Class 100. So I do believe our projections are accurate and will come very close to what you're seeing before you.
But isn't it ironic that your original appropriations were $394,476,608, and your estimate now is exactly that number?
I agree with you, the numbers are exact, and it is very much due to our close monitoring of our 6 programs and their 6 programs spending through monthly budget monitoring reports.
Do you have a 6-month statement that you've looked at?
We do not formally, the city does not formally prepare 6 months financial statements or quarterly financial statements, but we do monthly budget monitoring reports. We'd be happy to share those with you.
I mean, I guess my point is that, in general, you've been under the appropriations by far.
That is correct.
Okay?
I-
And this year, what you're saying is we're going to be right at that number, which means you've picked up that extra 23 million that you were under last year on top of that.
I think it's going to be very close.
But follow what I'm saying, you picked up an extra 23 that you were
Yes.
under last year, plus the increase for this year.
Transfer the positions.
Correct.
It's like 34 million in 1 year, which is almost 10%.
Correct. So when you're comparing it to fiscal year 19, you're seeing additional burden from regulatory compliance. So on top of the $5 million of overspending related to a very specific program in the Class 200, fiscal year 19, that program has an additional 10 million built into it. 19 is even higher than 18 because we've had to transfer positions from the capital budget. We've added staffing related to regulatory compliance, so
I understand all that. I'm just saying that I doubt that the obligations are identical to the appropriations. I'm not sure we have a real number there. You don't have to answer it. I'm just telling you my opinion.
I appreciate your opinion. Thank you.
I might add also, there were some unexpected costs. We are now having to purchase some vehicles which were budgeted in capital out of operating, and we're doing that this fiscal year. So that's another $3 million right there.
I know, but you're talking, see, the difference is that last year when you came to us asking for the budget, you showed us a number of 375 going to 394. This is my point.
Right.
Okay, which was a $19 million increase. But in essence, because you were 15 million below, it became 34 million.
Right.
My question is it really going to be 34 or is it really 19?
Yeah, and we believe...
We had an extra 15 million of fluff there that was included in this year.
I understand, and we believe with the close monitoring that we're doing and what we're seeing, some of these unexpected costs, that we're going to be very close.
I think there's money there, but we'll see how this boils out. Let me ask you another question. The difference of Class 100 employee compensation, you're showing a difference of 3.35 million? And following up on the council president's question on 34 new full-time and 82 positions transferred, are those 116 positions, is that the reason for that difference?
Councilman, that's part of the reason for the difference. We do not fully fund vacancies, so while we're transferring capital positions to the operating budget, there are vacant positions in that total, and we only fund a portion of our vacant positions, but the rest of that is due to new staff, which we will fund at 100%, especially as it relates to regulatory compliance and existing mandates with some of our workforce costs.
So of the 116 positions, how many of those are actually filled?
Well, there's 34 new positions which are not filled because they haven't been approved yet, and of the 82 transfers from capital, 12 are filled.
12 are filled.
Correct, 70 are not.
So 12 are filled and 34 new ones that haven't been filled yet.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, there's a possibility there might be some excess money there too. I'm asking these questions because we're faced with increases that we're being asked to implement in taxes, and if we can cut our overhead within our different project areas and, water and other departments, it's a lot easier to cut our overhead than to ask people for an increase in taxes. So, I do think there's 15 million here, okay, that could be cut, and I think it's because you've done a good job. This isn't a bad thing. You've come under your budgets consistently, and my point is that last year, we sat here at this time, and you said it would be 375, and it turned out to be 360. So that was 15 million saved. And now, this year, you're asking for an increase from last year's 375 of 19 million, and on top of the 15, that's 34 million. So you have to really say to us, we've spent almost 10% of our budget more than last year, which would be a big increase in this economy. But I do know one thing, our pipes need help. I know they're old, and I know there's a lot of issues, and we had a lot of issues this past winter. I know all that stuff, and I think you're doing a good job handling it. I'm just saying there might be some money there that can be saved, and it could be pretty big. So what I'd like you to do is look at the actuals. I don't believe these are the actuals, unless it would be a 1 in 10 million that the actuals were exactly the same number as the estimates to the cent, okay? It's almost impossible. So last year we got the actuals, I believe. I'd like to see what the actuals really are when we get called back where we are right now, so we understand that.
We would be happy to provide you with year-to-date total obligations and as well as an estimate of what we expect to spend and where we're seeing overages, as our commissioner mentioned, in unexpected vehicle purchases that are going to hit fiscal year 18, which total about $5 million, and additional increases on regulatory compliance. No problem.
Let me ask you another question. The regulatory compliance requirements, we were adding 30-something people to comply. Have we looked at our ability to accommodate those requests through technology and not having to hire people?
We're always looking for efficiencies. A lot of the work, though, like with technology needs to be maintained. So some of those positions are for the folks to maintain that technology, calibrate that meter or whatever it might be. But we are always trying to figure out how we can be more cost effective. And in fact, with the long-term control plan, we're trying to reduce costs by bringing some of the maintenance in-house, and that's what some of those positions are related to, as opposed to contracting out with the high overhead and things like that.
And we sat down with OIT and said, this is our requirement. How can you help us with the technology to not have to hire people and instead use technology? Like, give them the problem and say, solve this through technology. How do we get this resolved?
I'm not sure that there are these unsolved problems out there technology-wise with a lot of the work we do. We have 6 large treatment plants, 37...
Let me just say this. I watched a film and I listened to a lecture over the weekend on Saturday that 46% of the jobs that are in the United States today in 20 years will be replaced by technology. Almost half.
I hear you. I also know that when I started in the department in the early 80s, we were upgrading our 3 wastewater treatment plants to comply with the Clean Water Act. And back then, there were computers everywhere, and everything was going to be remotely controlled. You wouldn't need any people, and there were thousands of signals that had to be maintained. And to be able to remotely or automatically control a valve, you need a lot of infrastructure, and that infrastructure needs to be maintained. And in fact, we've come to a balance over the years, quickly actually, of the people part and the technology part. And that's what we're constantly working on doing. When we can make things automatic, we do that. When we can take advantage of technology, we do that. And we're always looking for opportunities.
Okay. There's one last comment, then I'm done. I just want to say that, and I know you know this, but when we increase the labor, 3.3 million, it's not really 3.3 million.
We know.
It's closer to 7 or 8 million with the overhead and the fringe
Exactly.
benefits.
I know.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
I also want to thank you for your willingness to always work with us and congratulate you on the rollout of TAP. I think that we've gotten a lot of national attention, and while we've gotten a slow start, I think it's an important tool in our toolbox to keep people in their homes. I think to Councilman Dom's point, in our budgeting and our analysis, we had budgeted, for instance, Councilman, in the issue of TAP, 50% enrollment. We're not at 50% enrollment. What does happen to that extra money that was built into the funding?
So we have over 8,000 folks in TAP right now.
Which is
and
what percentage?
We're estimating around 20 to 30,000 people in TAP. We have yet to get a full year of that program. And standing it up has been pretty challenging, but as we know, we've done a lot to try to get the word out. And
yeah, I think the point is that there's when you get those kind of blocks of money, you're projecting out, and there's a 5 million underspent or whatever, the numbers start adding up. And I think, having a public discussion around that is important. But I won't belabor that because I think it's a great program, and I look forward to enrolling the 60,000 eligible people across the city. I wanted to talk a little bit around the bond covenants and how we spend money. You and I had a conversation about this yesterday. I look at the water department as an integral part of community development, and I do appreciate the fact that you've been willing to partner with us in Parks and Recs and looking at creative ways of supporting it. But as we move towards the future and more collaborations, how do we make sure that we can restore and rebuild when we do some of these projects? As you know, I'm concerned about the ability to really make people whole when we do Parks and Rec. So is there any more flexibility that can be built into our bond covenants? And if so, can we get a legal opinion on that for future bond covenants?
Yeah, we can, of course, get a legal opinion.
I think that's hugely important, because as you and I talk all the time, people don't know the difference between the water department, the streets department, the rec department.
Right.
It is their tax dollars, and they want to see them used. So I think it's important if we get some clarity. Can you quickly, and if not, submit to the chair, the $14 million in stormwater management that goes over to PIDC, what does that invest in?
So that is for our grants program for the highly impacted customers, commercial customers, to incentivize them to, get the water out of our pipes, basically. And
So this is the stormwater
Smith and
management for the industrial and
Smith
commercial
and Garp,
properties?
so, right.
So,
And I'm sorry, so PIDC administers the program and get, the vendors.
what's the utilization there of the money? Do we use it all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very popular. It's also one of the least expensive approaches, or we like to say per green acre. It's the cheapest green acre we get overall of all the programs, except for, of course, development, where there's more than 15,000 square feet of earth disturbance, which is not cost the department anything.
We've been having a broader conversation around contracting. Can you tell me, and Christine was on yesterday, CAO, and we were talking about, and Commissioner Carroll in the last couple of weeks, what is your process for developing an RFP and an RFQ? How many people in your department are authorized to generate one, and what is your process of review and authorization?
So with the RFP, RFQ process, it depends upon what the issue might be. It can originate in our planning and research group, or Office of Watersheds, or with AMI, it started in operations. And so it's reviewed by many, many folks, and we get the proposals back, and it's a diverse group of folks that review it. It could be, include law department, procurement, OEO, as well as the technical experts on whatever that topic might be.
So
And-
Christine has told us that she does not have the authority to disbar anyone. Has your department ever disbarred or not granted the lowest responsible bidder for any vendor that currently has a contract with you that's delayed over budget or anything? Have you ever utilized that opportunity to say, look, we're not going to put this person here because they're non-compliant in another contract?
Well, so there are two types of contracts, right? So there's the low bid, but then the RFP process, so with proposals. And one of the things that goes into an evaluation of a vendor that's proposing, and the beauty in some ways of an RFP process, is that you don't have to take the lowest cost vendor. And if we've had a bad experience, or another department has had a bad experience, that's going to go into the evaluation of that vendor. And more than likely is going to result in them not being selected. Whereas the low bid contracts...
So you have a matrix of some sort that you make this evaluation tool. Do you agree with me that I think that it's time, given the amount of money both in your department and other departments, that we begin to establish some standards across the board? We're all struggling with this issue of inclusion and participation, and do we debundle? How do we build capacity? Would you be opposed to establishing some standards? And if you think your process is a good one, would you share it with with council so that we can look at it for best practices purposes?
We would always want to work on improving the process, of course.
Okay. I look forward to that discussion. I think that particularly in the water fund, because we don't review your budget in its entirety, if there's some best practices that you have there that you can share with us, we'll follow up on that. I want to deal with some town and gown issues, as Councilman Jones would say. During this winter, there was a really bad winter, and we had a lot of water breaks. And we had situations where crews were spread out, and in one particular incident that you had to intervene on, we had a water break in a house, and there was an acknowledgement that you couldn't get to close all the water leaks because there's a special key and whatever. What are we going to do next year to improve that? Because in one case, we had water running over the weekend. What are we going to do to improve, given the horrible winter we have, to make sure we can get out and close all the running water all over the city?
Well, this was a particularly challenging winter, as you know, acknowledge, and actually it was the worst winter we've seen in the last 24 years. Last year, for instance, last fiscal year, the total number of water main breaks we had was 715, and we're at 865 right now. 600 of which of those happened December, January, February. There were over 2,200 calls just for leaks, which were not obviously all related to water main breaks. And mobilizing folks, we work longer days, we change shifts, and this year we enlisted folks from some of our treatment plants and other units to augment our forces in distribution. We did actually discuss contracting out, and that's not something we do lightly, but it didn't seem that it would speed up anything for our customers. One of the things that should help reduce this is our long-term capital program to relay those water mains. And as I think you know, we're increasing from 32 to 42 miles a year. That's our five-year plan.
Right.
So things like that. And when we relay water mains, we do the lead service lines as well. So that's always good to get rid of those.
Right.
And we're better informed, and I think we're probably react a little faster next year if we start seeing the winter we saw this year.
Okay, so I think, again, this is important in the context of the Water Board's review of a rate increase, right? These are the town and gown issues people are going to ask us about. Are we getting building inefficiencies? What's our response time? As it relates to the help program and when we make decisions that it's the owner's responsibility versus ours, how do we ensure transparency in that? I've yet to have a case where it's the water department's fault, right? It's usually the resident. And one of the complaints I get all the time is, how do I know for sure, right? So what is your quality control in evaluating and determining when these household issues, when you send a crew out, how do you ensure quality and control to make sure that if, in fact, it's the resident? How do I assure residents that we have a fair process?
Well, hopefully the customer guide will go a long way in informing our customers. There's the customer responsibilities laid out in the guide. And so some of it is just information and letting folks know what they are and are not responsible for. I would maybe be as bold to suggest that maybe you're not hearing about the good things where we do actually say this is our responsibility and we fix it.
Yeah, that's not the calls we get.
I know, exactly.
The other ones.
Exactly, but we're always happy to sort through those things. And
So
the one thing...
is this data captured somewhere that you can share, this is how many calls we get, this is when we take responsibility, maybe having some of that data sets help us, and I don't know if you're required to present that as part of your rate increase, but I think that would be important. And one more, I know my clock.
Well, yeah, but there's some people waiting.
Okay, I'll wait for the next round.
Thank you.
I'll be respectful.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Good morning, Water Department. Following up on Councilwoman Blackwell's and Councilwoman Sanchez's interest in the rate increase, what is the bottom line dollar amount that we get from the feds?
We don't get any material money from the federal government or the state government. So, I mean, there might be a grant here or there, but it's really minimal.
And what about the capital?
So for fiscal year 17, Councilman, we received approximately $1 million in grant monies. What we tend to receive from the federal government is a loan. It's debt. It looks just like any other debt that we have.
It's a loan, it's debt.
Yes. So back in 2008, 2009 was the last time the Water Fund has received any type of material funding from the federal government, and it was in the form of a loan from the federal government related to the American Reinvestment Recovery Act.
And I have to admit, I'm over here multitasking. Remind me why the rate increase, the water rate increase. Why? The why? Not the why.
So why? Well, costs are going up. We, as you've heard, that we want to increase our water main relay investment from 32 miles a year to 42 miles a year. The people part of it, the regulatory compliance.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah, I mean, the long-term control plan is not, costs some money, and just getting things done that we need to get done. I mean, we spent a lot of money this winter, for instance, with these water main breaks and in overtime and things like that. So, and you get claims because of the water main breaks, so the indemnity fund is challenged as well.
Okay. Last year, I raised a lot of questions about your apprentice program and Power Corps, and give me an update on that effort, coupled with, are there any other programs where you are engaging local communities, other nonprofit organizations, period, where you're getting young people engaged at the high school level who can ultimately become employees for the Philadelphia Water Department? Is there still a relationship in place with Power Corps?
Yes, we love Power Corps.
So what's the update?
So
How many young
we
people
have,
are served?
we have, between Power Corps and our apprenticeship program, there are 37 folks that are employees now, are gainfully employed, so to speak.
So what was the gross number that you started with?
Whoa.
If 37 ultimately ended up in work, where did you
Right.
start? So you,
No, we have more Power Corps folks than 37. Yeah, I don't know, we've been doing this for a number of years. There've been usually, per cycle, there's usually around 20 to 30 folks that
start and finish?
Yes, and the one thing I can say is that the idea is you may not get a job with us, but you get a job with somebody else too.
Okay.
So it gets you the skills, and Power Corps is very good with the supportive services that those folks have, and that's why I'm very fond of the program.
So am I. Do you have the capacity to, is Power Corps the only pathway for young people or those that get accepted into Power Corps, or are there other programs like Power Corps that could be a part of that effort?
So we work with the school district on an apprentice program as well, and we get folks in that way. Some of the other positions we work on, this is the 4th year with an internship program for the summer interns for some of the professional titles, and our target is for diverse and inclusive candidates. In that effort.
If you could pause right there, talk in more detail about the school district, because we hear a lot of departments say they work with the school district, which is very nebulous for me. I need facts. What does that mean? How many schools are you involved with? How many young people do you start out with? How many ultimately successfully get through the effort and then get picked up by the water department?
I think on your table there's a good summary, or on your desk, I'm sorry, of our programs.
Okay.
But so basically with the apprentices, the seniors that, folks that are going to graduate in June will start coming and working for us a day a week.
Okay. Very good. This is helpful.
Then when they graduate, they come and work for us as as an exempt employee and basically, move into a utility apprentice position.
Okay.
If they, we provide classes that they take on, as well as on-the-job training.
Is there room to grow this program?
That's a great question, because there is some capacity issues. When you have vacancies, being a mentor for a young person and having a lot of folks that need training can be a challenge. So we work very hard to balance that, make sure that we don't overburden the units,
Sure.
but because we want it to be valuable for both parties. And so we always are striving to get that balance.
So there is the capacity to grow, but the impediment is that there's not an adequate number of professionals currently in place where you can match them up with a young person. Is that what I'm hearing?
That can be a challenge, right? That's one of our challenges, to make sure that, so in the field operations, right, in the treatment plants, you might have 5 electricians, and some may be better than others, and so you wouldn't want to pair an apprentice with each one of those electricians. You'd want the more skilled and senior person, and you'd also want someone that wants to do it. And we recently were able to
Sure.
get an incentive pay for those folks that agree to be mentors.
Okay.
We work with OHR to get that done, and we're excited that we can now offer that to folks and give them more incentive
Okay.
to do that. But it's a balance. You can't have 5 electricians and 6 apprentices. You need to get, we need to maintain our equipment as well. So
Well
it's just, that's
understood.
how we're doing it.
A few years back, I asked the question to provide a table of organization of the water department because I was not sure about the composition at the executive suite level. Speak to where you are with regards to the issues of diversity and inclusion.
So we are, work very hard to be a diverse and inclusive department. And one of the things we're focused on is the pipeline. So this past, since fiscal 17, we have 93 new hires in the department, and 63% are minorities. We're following the mayor's selection process. We work with Nolan Atkinson. We're very committed to, diversity and inclusion in our workforce, and we know how that can make a difference. And for me, the pipeline is, one of the best ways. That's why we're focused on a good internship program in the summer.
Okay.
Donna and I and Joanne that was up here earlier, we were some of the first women engineers in the department back in the 80s, and now we're leadership. So that I see that can work, and so committed to trying to get that pipeline, because that's a big key from my
And what about
perspective.
black and brown people moving up the ranks with regards to leadership opportunities? Where are we? How well are we doing?
So, as I said, that 63% of those folks that we've hired are minority, and
Are they entry level?
they're all over across the
Up and
board.
down the ladder?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could provide to the chair a table of organization of your department as it exists today. I asked that question 5 years ago. I'd like to see it again in its current configuration.
Okay.
Okay? Now moving to lead, we know that you regulate the amount of lead and copper in drinking water to minimize the release of lead from service pipelines. How can citizens get their service lines tested? Can they?
Well, our website has guidance on how to figure out if you do have a lead service line. If you still can't figure it out, we can come out and determine that for you.
Is that right?
Yes. And we're very proud since we've replaced over 550 lead service lines since July of 2016 through either the water main relay or the HELP loan program. So constantly trying to get the word out. We'll sample. If you're concerned about lead, we want as many folks as possible to be part of our lead and copper sample program.
What is it called? Lead
and copper sampling program.
Okay.
That will be coming up in another year. We have to do it every 3 years, but the regulators have made us get on cycle with everybody else, so we're doing it in 2 years, and then we'll be caught up and be doing it every 3 years.
I see.
So we did a special sampling in fiscal in 2016, then our regulatory requirements were in 17, and we'll do it again in 19. But the results are support the fact that what we're doing at our treatment plants to coat the pipe, the zinc orthophosphate that we add as part of the treatment process to keep the lead from leaching into the water when it sits in a pipe does seem to be effective.
I see.
But we always like folks to flush the cold water before they drink it.
Yes. Okay, I'll continue the next round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Gim?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning. So I wanted to, speaking of like enthusiasm over the TAP program, I was just at a conference in Chicago where the mere mention of an income-based utility program had everyone in, the audience just like gasping in awe. So I just have to give kudos to my colleague, Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez, and the Water Department for partnering on really innovative and front line type of program that is really making a lot of municipalities excited. Councilwoman, I'm directing them to you, since you're the expert here. So, I know that there's been discussion already about enrollment in the program, but one of the things that was mentioned in your testimony a little bit was about how there are, 15,000 applications and 6,600 of them have been approved. Have you been analyzing whether the delta between the two is about denials? Are they pending? Are they under review?
So we're actually now up to over 8,000 applications approved, and I believe it's 17,000 off the top of my head applications submitted, and total generated is around 34,000. But there is a report that we're required to provide to City Council. Commissioner Breslin, I believe, issued that last week. Yeah, and has a lot of good data in it.
In terms of whether the difference between the 8 to 17,000, does it cover whether people were denied, whether they're under pending review? What's happening with the 9,000?
Well, some of the applications are incomplete, but it does speak to applicants not enrolled in TAP. So the number denied, total denials through December 31st were 2,344. So they failed to meet the income and residency guidelines, was 104 of those. The highest number, missing or invalid income or residency documentation. So that was 1,500 folks that did not meet that requirement. Missing information on the application was about 95. Failed to prove special hardship was 38. But that is in the commissioner's report.
Okay. Maybe we could take a look at that, and particularly when it comes to residency, I'm curious about why they are unable to fill out residency and whether it relates to other types of issues that they're having. So just wanting to, I think it helps us to know why some of the applications are incomplete and whether the rest then are on track. So if you're saying that there's something like 2,300 that are denied, then the estimate would be that there's an additional 7,000 plus that are up for likely to be approved. And it's just a matter of timing? Is it just a matter of going through the applications quickly enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that part of some of the request for additional funding for the Water Department? Will it help increase, is any of it directed towards increasing the speed at which individuals can enroll in the TAP program?
So this is administered by the Water Revenue Bureau. So
Helpful.
they
Okay.
did get 22 employees last year in their budget, which, water revenue is part of the water fund, but the program is administered by the Water Revenue Bureau.
Administered through the Revenue Department. That's a helpful clarification. Thank you very much. One of the things that was in your testimony was a little bit about the Marcellus Shale grant money. So I know that that's a program that's been in effect. I assume it says that Philadelphia was a recipient around things like the Greenways Trails program and that there's other opportunities for it. Could you talk a little bit about the Marcellus Shale Fund, whether there's grant money, how much you anticipate, when you think it will go into effect, and what it's mostly geared towards?
So we've been receiving the Marcellus Shale, I believe it's Act 13 funds, for the past few years. It's less than $1 million. It's approximately $740,000. It might be actually $744,000 to be exact. We typically allocate the funding towards our Greened Acre Retrofit Program, which is one of our most cost-effective tools for meeting our consent order and agreement requirements.
Could you repeat that again? What program does it mostly go?
It's typically allocated towards our SMIP and GARP program, our grant program.
The incentives program.
Okay. Great. And I guess it's helpful to know what the amount is. So I think it wasn't entirely clear from that, because I know some of it can be used towards stormwater improvement. Some of it can be used for other types of facilities. It's pretty, I mean, I know it can be used for greenways, trails. I'm just trying to look through my notes about what other areas it can be used for. But I guess one of the questions was whether it can be, any of it can be used to offset some of the more systemic things that are being billed currently to residents, like whether that's the fire protection, the amount of money from the fire department, or the additional money for stormwater management.
So it is used for stormwater management. We actually split the money with Parks and Rec, which was the original agreement, I think. And so it's directed towards stormwater, and that's what our incentives program is directed toward.
And directed specifically towards the costs that you have
Right.
to deal with on
Right.
stormwater management. Okay, thank you. Could you give an update on the program regarding stormwater improvement that is specifically directed towards schools? I know that that's been a program that was really welcomed in the past, and it would help to just hear what are some updates on the program, what the current status is, because we hear a lot of differing things from schools and communities. There's some level of confusion around it, and if there are any barriers that are happening right now that you think we should be aware of so that we could maybe help address them for school communities.
So to date, 14 schools, we've done projects at 14 schools that, for about $4.5 million has been spent at 14 schools, and currently there are 4 projects under consideration for a total of $1.3 million. Actually, this afternoon, we have if we're not still here, we have a meeting with the school district. We meet with them routinely to go over some of the challenges that each of us are having and how we can figure out the best work together. So we're working through a lot of the issues and view them as very good partners.
Can schools currently apply for these funds
Yes.
through
Oh, yeah.
the water department?
Yes,
Okay.
and they do. That's what those 4 projects in the queue.
And do you anticipate that growing or staying stagnant? Is it based on, what is the expansion of the program based on, or growth of the program based on?
Well, the capacity within the school district, I would say, and the ability to get stormwater to their sites.
So any limitations to the program is primarily due to the school district of Philadelphia's capacity?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to, it's a partnership, right? So I don't want to go to them and say, oh, you have to do this. I mean, they have to want it also. And some of the things that can take a little longer are involving all the stakeholders and working with them and figuring out what makes sense for that schoolyard. So the parents, the teachers, the principal, when there are things that we can't necessarily pay for, getting in other partners like Trust for Public Land that can, raise money for some of the other amenities on that schoolyard. So that takes time.
And so if the school district, and obviously this is a big if, but if the school district were to be able to say we have the capacity to handle 10 more projects in the coming year, the water department would have the capacity to partner with the district to do that? Or are you limited in any way?
Well, it's a funding issue.
It's a funding issue?
Yeah.
Okay, and how much money is allocated towards that program?
It's currently $15 million.
Annually, or?
Yes, we are looking to increase it, and that is part of our ask in the rate increase.
So for this fiscal year, you're saying that you've already covered 14 schools?
No. Since we've been working with the school district. I'm sorry, I did not mean to mislead you.
Okay. So you said that the total program is $15 million annually, but there's...
The incentives program, yes.
Okay, and right now there's about 5.8 million that's been out, that you have spent. So there's room to grow the program.
No, 4.5 million.
Yep.
At 14 schools over the period since, I believe...
For each school or total?
Total, for 14 schools. And then there's 1.3 million under consideration right now for 4 projects.
Yeah. So that's 5.8, and you said that you
Well, we've
allocated...
not, okay, but we didn't spend that,
Right.
all of it, okay.
But there's 15 million allocated.
For
the
our
program?
incentives program, that is open to commercial properties as well. It's not just targeted for the school district. It's anybody that wants a SMIP or GARP grant.
Okay. So again, just to repeat though, that if the school district were to come to you with saying like, look, we have the capacity to do this many more grants, it sounds like there's room within the program to expand it to more schools if the district were to be able to have that capacity. Is that correct?
So the SMIP and GARP program, there's a committee that evaluates what projects make the most sense and which are most cost-effective. We take the ratepayers' money very seriously, and so one school or one customer property, it might cost $300,000 per green acre, and another might be $500, and another might be $100, and that $100,000 per green acre actually might be 5 green acres. Well, we're more than likely going to, the committee would pick that one because we'll get more bang for a buck, if you will, and our ratepayer dollars. So it depends upon the quality of the project and the costs. It's not just a given that we can just spend the money whomever applies. We have a high demand. We have people waiting, not just in addition to the school district, other folks that want to be part of this program. So it's very well accepted and it's in high demand. And one of the reasons we want to increase the budget for it.
So I'll let my colleagues go because I want to make sure that we have a go around. But I think one of the questions I'll ask on the second time is whether you've noticed a shift in the program in terms of spending towards schools versus other non-school related expenses over the course of the program. So I'll wait for my next turn on that one.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Squilla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, and thank you, Commissioner, and all for attending and for putting up with all my harassment along the way for our constituents. One thing, and it seems like coordination with the streets is very good with water, but it seems like sometimes we're lacking with coordination with some of the other utilities. And I know there's a one call that we do when we do work and things like that, but it sounds in South Philadelphia, there's projects like on 9th Street and Mifflin Street where all sections are blocked off and people can't get there. For PGW, maybe doing something on one block, water doing something on another block. Is there anything we could do better to coordinate if that's happening, how we can make sure at least we have a way to get around the neighborhood?
I'm sure there is, and I think that's, so when we do the capital work, typically PGW will go ahead of us, and then when they're done, they'll turn the street over to us, and then our contractor can begin his work, or work, usually it's him's. But we're happy to work with Streets Department to figure out if there's a better way to do that.
When they're, I guess, getting permits to do the work, is it streets who would look at it and say, we can't block these 2 streets off because there's no way to circulate traffic? Or would that be something that PGW, Water, and Streets all does together?
We should probably all 3 work on that together, I would say.
Okay.
It is ultimately, I don't want to throw my brethren under the bus, but it is ultimately up to Streets. How that would.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Montanez.
Good morning. Please identify yourself for proceed.
Richard Martinez, Deputy Commissioner, Streets Department. Yeah, the Streets Department works together with the Water Department, PGW, and all utilities to try to coordinate the best as possible. Sometimes what throws a kink on this is the fact that emergency work comes in, so we have to try to coordinate detours. At times, we do change traffic directions on streets to accommodate the neighbors.
Okay, and I think that when we get those concerns, obviously we forward them over to you guys, and then everybody's jumping through hoops to try to get people to understand. And some of these projects take longer than others, and sometimes they're delayed because of complications, and I think that's not foreseen also. But at least I think what we could say is that they are collaborating and communicating, and just sometimes we hit a snag. And I appreciate your help, and Streets too, and always being receptive and responsive to our requests. And even if sometimes it's not the answer that the constituents want to hear, at least we get an answer for them and continue to work with them and follow up with a dialogue. So both streets and water, I thank you for that.
Thank you.
I know, Commissioner, you have a lot of work planned for maintenance, and it seems like there's a lot of infrastructure work going on. What kind of work do we have planned for maintenance and the upkeep of your existing infrastructure?
So we have around 7,000 miles of pipes, 3,200 miles of water main, 3,500 miles of sewer, and we're looking to increase the replacement from a rate of 32 miles a year to 42 miles a year of water main and 10 miles of sewer, going from around 6 to 8 to 10 miles of sewer by 2024. It's something that, we believe investing in our infrastructure will pay in the long term and reduce water main breaks and water in people's basements as a result of those breaks and things like that. It is disruptive, but
It's all the fun stuff we deal with, and certain streets obviously are worse than others, and again, I do appreciate the collaboration, and not everything is, every time we have an issue, it's always a distinct issue, a unique issue that's not related to another street, and so it's not something one size fits all fix for everybody.
Exactly.
And
if
so,
only.
yeah, I wish it was that case, and sometimes it's one lateral, sometimes it's 10 laterals, and whether it's a sinking street or not. So we've been going through all this in the last couple of years with you guys, but like I said, you are willing to be at the table and discuss, work our way through this, and hopefully that will continue. So thank you for all your help along the way, and looking forward to continue working with you.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Dom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple more quick questions for you. You have an increase, I think it's in class 800. And I think the increase was about 5.3 million. I was wondering why that increase was almost like close to 8%.
Councilman, I'm happy to answer the question. Are you speaking about fiscal year 17?
I'm speaking to, I'm sorry, it's in class 3400, 5,148,000. Materials, supplies, and equipment.
Yeah, that of course is driven by a policy change citywide. We are no longer, starting fiscal year 19, we're no longer able to procure certain vehicle types out of capital. It's your basic sedan or your basic SUV. And so those costs have been shifted from the capital budget to the operating budget. Specialty vehicles will continue to remain a capital expense.
So it's not for chemical increases or anything having to do with treating the water, it's for equipment?
It's predominantly related to the equipment.
Okay. And then on this, I'm not sure this question's for you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I have to ask it, okay? Do we have an idea of how many delinquent accounts we have and how much money is delinquent with the water department in total?
So I don't have the number of accounts within reach, but I believe the Revenue Department last reported total receivables, which is out over the 15-year period of approximately $360-odd million. And that's everything that has a lien on it over the 15-year period. That is not the accounting statement look, which writes things off after 1 year in our GAAP financial statements, which is much lower.
So here's my other question. Can you find out the number of delinquent accounts for us that make up the $360 million? And can I ask the reasoning why we write off a utility after 15 years? Especially on a property that would be investor or commercial or industrial.
Councilman, I don't want to dare misspeak on this subject. This is very much led by our Revenue Department. If we may get back to you with a response on that.
Because I understand for maybe owner occupants. I don't understand for commercial, industrial investors why we'd write it off. So maybe you can let us know. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today, and thank you. Thank you.
Councilwoman Sanchez.
Thank you. be happy to bring you up to date around some of those collection numbers, particularly around some of the auditing, and very similar to our property tax situation, there was a lot of bad debt that we like to borrow from but was uncollectible. So be happy to have you join in that conversation, which is why I push for TAP to separate the issue of invested and what we can collect there versus going after, and what had been a practice in the past, about potentially people losing their house for water debt when they weren't enrolled in benefit programs. So I'd be happy to have you join that conversation around those issues. And I think, again, the administration has moved into better collection, better strategy. The issue of carrying bad interest and penalty for purposes of bond and borrowing versus real good collection practices is one we've been debating in this council for a very long time. So thank you. I appreciate your support around some of that. So I want to go back to town and gown issues related to the water department. So we're doing a lot of infrastructure investment on water barrels, getting people involved. Can you speak to me a little bit around how are we constructing this given the capital dollars restriction, and where is the liability being assumed? You know, are residents going to be liable for some of these things that are going up? Are we as a utility going to be responsible? What's our long-term maintenance plan on them?
For the green infrastructure or the rain barrels? So the rain barrels is a program that we work with PHS on. And so that's a contract with PHS. But the maintenance of the green stormwater infrastructure, if it's owned by the water department, then it's our responsibility to maintain that.
So when we put something in someone's resident's home, right, these rain barrels or some of the other stuff that's going on, do we have an agreement with the resident? I'm looking long-term, right? Like, if someone just buys a house, has this infrastructure that we've invested, so, you know, how much are we putting in there, right? What's the investment, and who assumes the liability for these things?
Well, so the folks that are part of the Rainbow program would take a class, and at the end of that class with PHS, they would get the rain barrel. And it's up to them to install it responsibly and use the water that they...
So what's the cost of that? When people make this, assume this stormwater, who bears that cost?
Well, ultimately, the ratepayers, because it's a program paid for by the water department.
So the water department, so do we pay the resident for assuming some of this infrastructure?
No.
So
no,
we pay
a rain
for the
barrel, it's more of
infrastructure?
an educational program. You know, a rain barrel is 50 gallons, and they fill up pretty quickly. It's more about, you know, every little bit helps, but more about the awareness of the importance of
So we pay for
keeping
the
water
rain
out of
barrel? We pay for the rain barrel that we give folks?
Yes.
What is the package? What is that package costing us? In terms of, like, what's the investment that we're making? I'm very curious around this stuff, particularly what's going on in Puerto Rico. But, so we give person a rain barrel. We assume they install it correctly. Is there a cost to installing, and what is that?
Well, it usually would be typically just disconnecting the downspout and connecting and having that water go into the rain barrel. And then the bypass, so any excess, once that rain barrel's full, going back down, you know, continuing down to your drain.
Okay.
So
what's the average cost of that?
It's around $50, if I'm not mistaken. We can get you an exact number.
How many have we installed all over the city? How much participation are we getting?
This is a very popular program that's been going on for several years. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but we can get back to you on that.
Okay. And so how much water are we diverting with it? I mean, are we capturing that data? Because I know it's part of the long-term plan.
Well, that actually, we don't take credit for that because that would entail having to inspect and verify that everybody's properly connecting it. It's empty before every storm and things like that. So it's more of a, as I said, an educational, and the hope is that folks are using it, they're emptying it, and it's ready for the next storm, and, you know, every little bit helps. But we need to remove billions of gallons from our stores. So 50 gallons is a help.
Right. Is that my bell? I just started. Okay. So real quickly.
Oh, okay. I saw that look, so I'm not going to interrupt.
I want to, and I'll wait for the next round. I want to get to the trees and how we're doing around the tree installations along the city as it relates to diverting stormwater. So I don't know, are you folks the right people to ask, or should I be asking Parks? And
If we're doing tree trenches, then it would be us.
yes, okay. All right, I'll wait for my next round. Sorry, Councilman.
Thank you. Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you talk a bit about the education center? You say it reaches 60,000 adults and children on a yearly basis.
I didn't hear her. I'm sorry, Councilwoman, I couldn't hear you. Could you?
My error. I'm talking into the sheet here. Speak in detail about the education center. In your testimony, you state that it reaches 60,000 young people a year. So what are the goals of the education center, and how far wide are you? Do you have that presence?
So throughout the region, but in particular within Philadelphia, the Fairmont Waterworks, we work with school district and with summer programs, as well as throughout the year, on environmental education. And it's not just at the waterworks, but that is our primary location with the 60,000 folks that you mentioned.
So of that 60,000, how many young people from Philadelphia are tapped, are reached?
I would say that's the majority of them. Yeah, yes, that's the majority.
And is that does that program have a presence in all of the councilmatic districts? Where precisely are those programs?
Well, they're primarily out of the Fairmont Waterworks. So that's where,
So children have to come to the
there.
waterworks?
We have a lab. It's a really cool place. And we have a mussel hatchery. You got to come visit it. It's very, very cool. And just trying to promote the thought in children about environmental education and be more environmentally responsible. And how?
Is it principals who are resourceful who come, or does this water department make a very intentional recruitment effort to schools across the system? How does it happen? How does it get in the eyes and ears of Philadelphia school children?
Hi, Councilman. This is Joanne Don, Public Affairs Manager.
Good morning.
We work very closely with the school district. We work with their education team, and we have been developing a curriculum in combination with the school district leadership on watershed education and protection. So we are working citywide. We work with any schools that are interested in coming down to the waterworks. So we have representation from all over the city. But we also have a teacher leadership program where they are more self-selected, you're right. So some principals and some teachers are more, not I'm saying more interested, but they have more time or
Sure.
looking to get credits in environmental education. So they have become part of the Fairmont Waterworks teacher leadership program. We have about 30 of them at this point in time. But every year we're looking to recruit 15 to 17 more. And it does rely on the interest of that particular school. But our education programs are offered to every school in the city of Philadelphia, public, parochial, and private.
I see. Gee whiz. Can you get the list of those schools? The school district is up soon, and that is a follow-up question I'd like to pose to the school district. Can you provide to the chair a list of the schools that are currently participating?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we'd be happy to get that too. Yeah,
That-
certainly happy to put that
All
together.
right, then that would be very helpful. Thank you. That's it on the education program. In reviewing the demographics of the water department, please, you said you had 97 new hires, 67 were minorities. How many of those were staff exempt positions? Were any of those exempt?
None of them were exempt. And it's 99 new hires, 63% of minorities.
Okay.
But none were exempt.
None were exempt. Have you had the opportunity to make any hires in the exempt positions this past year?
I believe it was within the last 12 months, definitely, yes, 3 appointments, all minority.
Okay. I have to tell you, I am struck, if I'm reading this correctly, that of the 8, well, let me ask a different question. What skill sets are you looking for at the executive level? or what skill sets are required at the executive level?
Well, I guess it would depend upon what the position would be.
Okay.
So, if it's the deputy of operations, I would want someone that's an engineer probably,
Okay.
and has some knowledge of water and wastewater treatment and collection and distribution. But
Okay.
again, it depends upon the vacancy.
And speaking again to pipeline, those professionals that have risen through, those professionals that are now in executive positions, have they risen through the ranks, or are they the result of exempt appointments? Of the 8, if I'm looking at this correctly, there are 8 at the executive level, based on the chart that you provided.
Mm-hmm. So the majority have come up through the organization. One was a contractor who worked with us for years, and we brought on as an exempt position. But the majority of folks have come up through the ranks.
Okay. All right, then. The bell has rung, so I'll have to wait to the next round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Just for the record, we have 3 more departments left today.
Okay.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Council President. You always say that before I'm ready to get up. But I just have one last question. Could you do us a favor? You may not know this answer right now, but of the $360 million that's delinquent, do you know how much of that is the non-owner occupied delinquency in dollars?
Blondell here.
We would need to work with our colleagues at the Revenue Department, so we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony today. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman? Your mic is still open.
Forgive me.
Were you interested? You good? Thank you. Thank you. It appears that there are no more questions of these witnesses. Thank you very much for your testimony. But as always, please be prepared to be called back. We have callbacks in 2 weeks in the event that there are some additional questions. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony today.
Thank you.
You're
Have
welcome.
a good afternoon.
Next up, we got streets.